I think we're so drawn as people to this idea that, oh, I can go and do this thing, this exterior thing where I'm checking myself into rehab, I'm taking this action, or I can, go to these meetings or whatever, and then this like action that's happening on the external world is going to affect change within. Whereas the change that needs to happen is from within because that's where the problem lies. Why does the world act like alcohol is the answer, even while it is creating problems of its own?
On the Alcohol Myth podcast, we pull back the curtain so you can see what's really going on with alcohol and what life could be like without it.
We are coaches trained in This Naked Mind and effective liminal psychology who fell for the alcohol myth for decades. Now we help people take back control of their lives by changing their relationship with alcohol from the inside out.
You don't need to wait for a rock bottom. You don't need more willpower. You just need a new way to understand what you are feeling and why you are reaching for that next drink.
So let's dig in. And today we're diving into a truly messy middle concept that hits close to home for lots of people, the idea of gray area drinking. What does that bring up for you?
Yeah, this was a big one for me. When I first heard the term gray area drinking, I didn't hear it until about 2.5 years ago when I joined my first 21-day sober online challenge. Um, and it was brought up as part of the materials around, let's talk about drinking, right? And then Jolene Park actually has a TED Talk called Gray Area Drinking, and I watched that TED Talk, and I was like, what? I was so, I mean, I saw myself in it, right? Because I think I had this idea of like either you were a normal drinker or you were an alcoholic that needed to go to AA. And this area in the middle that is, called gray area drinking, or some people call it middle lane drinking. It's that, for me, it was that space of like, I'm drinking more than I want to. I'm drinking more often and larger amounts than I want to. But everywhere I look around, everybody's doing the same thing. All my friends, all my colleagues, everybody on television, all the things, they're drinking what appears to be similar amounts to me, but I'm waking up at 3 a.m. with a racing heart and regret and anger and frustration at myself. And nobody was talking about that. And so I was like, what, I just felt so confused. Like, why is everybody else able to drink all this and not have any repercussions, So it was a very lonely place. And when I saw that TED Talk, and when I started to hear people talk about this as a thing, I was like, oh my gosh, why? I just wanted everybody to know what that was, because I was like, if I'm, come to find out there's millions and millions and millions of us, when I thought I was the only one, like it just, yeah, that's my memory of it. Not very articulately stated, but it was a very pivotal moment for me to be like, what? I'm not alone. This is a thing. Um, yeah. What about you?
Well, that's fascinating because I hadn't heard of the term gray area drinking until we were in the middle of our certification. And I don't even think that I'm not certain that that concept is like in our certification. It's something I learned about kind of just being in the alcohol-free and sober spaces that
Mhm.
this concept kept coming up of gray area drinking. But I can definitely relate to that feeling of isolation and thinking, I don't think that I might be drinking a little bit more than everybody else is around me, but not that much more. And at the same time, experiencing all these negative effects, like you described, waking up at 3 a.m. with the heart racing and the sweats and feeling terrible most mornings and things like that. And so that I very much relate to. I didn't know to call it gray area drinking, and because I didn't really have a label for it, I guess I think naming things is a very powerful thing that we can do. And I feel like if I'd had a name for it, I might have taken action sooner to start reclaiming myself from drinking. But the only term that I had access to was alcoholic.
Mm.
And I certainly wasn't ready to identify myself as an alcoholic with all of that stigma and all the shame associated with that label. And so I don't know, I guess in a way, I wish that I had heard about the concept and had been able to identify with that more neatly. But because I didn't, I probably struggled more than was totally necessary.
Yeah, and I think that this is an important piece to talk about too, because that term alcoholic keeps so many of us stuck because we're so afraid of it, right? So it's like, how many people Google, am I an alcoholic? And then it comes up with all of the, these are the checklist, answer these questions. If you answer two or more of these questions, I mean, have you done that quiz?
You definitely Google that in incognito mode so that your browser doesn't track you
Yeah.
at 2 a.m. when you know you've been drinking more than you should have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to notice too, or to note that alcoholic isn't even a term that's used, or I mean, it is used by the medical profession, but it's not even in the DSM anymore, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual that doctors are supposed to use to characterize different conditions. And the correct term is alcohol use disorder, which is a spectrum that can go from anywhere from 1 to 10, which is basically like very normal or non-drinker to full blown, like really can't survive a day without a drink and not going into, you know, tremors and life-threatening conditions. But there's a whole spectrum in the middle. And I think most people actually fall somewhere along that spectrum because I don't have the questions in front of me right now, but I mean, one of the questions is, have you ever drank more than you intended to? I mean, who can't, anybody who's ever drank probably has drank more than they intended to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's especially as it's considered like a rite of passage or that's what you do when insert celebration, insert sad occasion, right? Like that's
Mhm.
the tool that we have. I want to go back to this idea of the label and like how damaging that term alcoholic and all the shame and stigma associated with it have. Like, did you have any experiences where you resisted making a change because of not wanting to take on that label?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I can remember very vividly sitting on my couch having the thought that I need to do something. I cannot continue this way. And meanwhile, remember, I was not someone that was outwardly exposing suffering, right? It was a very private journey for me. I ticked all the boxes of, I was a stay-at-home mom, but successful family. My kids were doing great in school. We had a very good social life. All the thing. Nobody would have looked at me from the outside and said I had a problem. And meanwhile, on the inside, I was completely unraveling. And I mean, even my husband and kids didn't know I had a problem. I mean, we've talked about this since me becoming alcohol free, and they've been shocked to discover that I was drinking a bottle of wine or more every single night. So I was hiding it and pretty effectively hiding it and thinking to myself, I don't want to keep doing this, and I have no idea how to stop doing this without exposing myself as an alcoholic and going to rehab. I thought that was my option. It was like I had to expose myself as an alcoholic and go to rehab, and that was so untenable to me that I just kept quiet for years. I mean, that went on for decades. I was worried about it. I was concerned with it. I knew I wanted to change. I didn't know how to change. But I sure as hell didn't want to be labeled an alcoholic.
Yeah, that story resonates with me so much because it mirrors my own where I I knew that I had a problem, and at the same time, I knew that I couldn't have a problem because I couldn't be an alcoholic because only other kinds of people are alcoholics. And I, again, had a successful loving marriage. I had professional career success. I had friends. I was even like, taking care of myself physically, like I was doing all these things, um, where on the outside that I was collecting the outside markers of success, even while, like you said so beautifully, I was falling apart on the inside. And it's a very personal, intimate, in your own mind kind of position when you don't feel like you can share that struggle with anybody else. And for fear of being told like you have this impossible option where you need to go and out yourself and go to meetings or go to a rehab or something and just kind of upend your whole life. And I didn't know that there was another way to regain control over my life that was outside of that. Um, and it's so interesting because like I think we're so drawn as people to this idea that, oh, I can go and do this thing, this exterior thing where I'm checking myself into rehab, I'm taking this action, or I can, go to these meetings or whatever. And then this like action that's happening on the external world is going to affect change within. Whereas the change that needs to happen is from within because that's where the problem lies.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that I've so loved about our our lens on this being effective liminal psychology certified coaches is we really focus on that interior experience and solving the root cause of the problem instead
Mhm.
of what it looks like on the outside. And so,
Yeah, that's two thoughts come to mind when you say that. One is this idea of, I think one of the things AA gets right, and I don't think we're here to criticize AA. It just wasn't something that we felt. I'll speak for myself. It wasn't something that I I didn't see myself there for whatever reason. Probably the images that I'd seen on television and read in books and on movies, and it felt like a dark basement with mostly men, telling these horror stories of rock bottoms. And I didn't have a rock bottom. I was just drinking more than I wanted to pretty much every day. Um, and but I think one of the things that AA gets really right is this need for community, this need for support, this need to know that you're not alone, that other people can relate to your experience, and that just together people can share and help eliminate that shame that we feel when we're over drinking. And so I think that piece is incredibly important. And then like to what you said, like this approach of affective liminal psychology is, it's not around black or white thinking or all or nothing. When I thought about making a change with alcohol, another thing that kept me stuck is I didn't really want to quit. I wanted to drink less. I didn't want to stop drinking. I mean, drinking was everything to me. So the idea of going to AA and having to give up my favorite activity and my best friend, like that was very prohibitive to me. So the methodology that we learned and that we coach with is much more about how do you want to feel and much less about the behavior of or how much are you drinking? Are you drinking? Is it day one? Do you have to go back to day one? Like it's not even about that. It's about like finding a way to feel the way that we want to feel.
yeah, I think about the how many reasons, again, going back to this idea of labels, like whether it's alcoholic or whether it's gray area drinking or whatever, but how many reasons for not making a change were baked into the language.
Mm,
Because you're right, like when you're drinking more than you want to, but drinking is the thing that gives you relief from whatever pain you're experiencing, it's that's a really hard sell, right? Like,
mhm,
hey, this thing that you know and understand, it's routinely, quote, been there for you. Um, it's the thing that you can count on to make you feel a certain reliable way.
mhm,
You can't do that anymore.
mm,
And I saw this great thing that was talking about how when you're when you're in the throes of addiction, it's what you're addicted to that is giving you, it's the only thing that can give you peace or comfort.
Mm.
And you have to give that peace and comfort up in order to experience peace and comfort with everything else outside of it. And
Mm.
that's certainly been the the journey that I've been on. Um,
No, me too.
but
And I think the idea of um, that the entry point of naming yourself an alcoholic or going to AA or something is that it's like a hard stop, without really understanding all the reasons why you've made alcohol so important in your life. I mean, I didn't comprehend. I knew that I used alcohol for everything. I definitely knew that. I knew I used it for joy, for celebration, for sadness, for loneliness. I used it. It was my, handy dandy handyman that I used for everything. But I didn't really understand how that had come to happen, because it
mhm,
wasn't always the case. I mean, when I first started drinking, it was for fun, it was social. So how is it that 30 years later, I'm also using it for sadness, for loneliness, for boredom, I mean, you name it, everything. And I think the training that we have been through and the learning that we have been able to do about understanding how alcohol works in the body too is a critical piece of understanding how it just sort of takes over every aspect of our living. Um, which is I'm excited to get to share some of those things because some of that science-based stuff is where I had some of my biggest ahas.
yeah, maybe that'll be our next episode.
Mm,
Um, because understanding that alcohol just is what it is, it's just a chemical that does certain things in the body, and it's
mm,
the same for every single person, like um, in spite of what, five beers might do for one person and what five beers might do for the other person, physiologically, the same mechanisms are happening, and it kind of, I think it puts the emphasis or the spotlight or I don't know, the cone of shame where it belongs on the substance as opposed
mhm,
to on the person. Like it just is what it is. And that's another thing that I love about the approach that ended up helping me break free from alcohol was it was the compassion that the approach offered me that made a little space in my insides, in my heart. Might sound
mm,
woo-woo, but like it made a little space
mm,
for there to be some dreaming, some imagining that something could be different. And then from that, it was like a little beachhead
mm.
where that little bit of compassion then turned into like more ground that I could build on and push forward and kind of it really feels like a reclaiming of myself um based off of that. So
Yeah, it's almost like decoupling the alcohol from the self, right? It's like I can remember the first time I experienced sort of an insight around this. I had learned about the effects of alcohol in the body, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but just like why we wake up at 3 a.m., right? Because we don't wake up at 3 a.m. sweaty with our heart racing with worried thoughts because we're terrible people. We do that because of the way alcohol impacts the body. And I can remember, I mean, I had spent decades waking up at 3 a.m., beating myself up, hiding my head in a pillow, like, oh my God, Ellen, you did it again. You said you weren't going to drink again tonight. You drank again too much. And, what in the world? And that was my narrative at 3 a.m. And after I had this learning about the science, I laid in bed that night and I was like, oh, isn't this interesting? Like, this is what alcohol does in the body. Alcohol is actually doing what it's designed to do in my body because I drank the alcohol. And this is what alcohol does. And it was like this, it was just this slight separation between me being wrong. And it was like, oh, this is what alcohol does. And there was just something about that moment that I refer to in my mind all the time. It's like it was a real insight for me. And it was the first time I could separate myself from the substance. And that allowed, to your point, for the compassion. Then it was like, oh, Ellen, I'm sorry, geez, I wish we'd known that this is what alcohol did to our bodies. Like, but now we know, and now we can work on it, right? Like,
That awareness is key, right? Like
mm,
it, and
hmm
it, I don't know, it's so empowering to have that little bit of awareness because then the next time, if you end up drinking again, that you can't unknow that truth
hmm
and that this isn't you and this is just what alcohol does. And then again, like you get a little bit more space
hmm
to separate that substance and self. It's very
Yeah.
powerful stuff. So, Ellen, before we go,
Mm.
if anyone's listening and they're curious if they are a gray area drinker,
Mhm.
do you have any insights onto like what would constitute a gray area drinker? What are some signs that someone might be a gray area drinker?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think for me, if you feel like you are drinking more than you want to, more often that you want to, and you don't understand why, because you've broken promises to yourself to cut back, you've you've made rules for yourself that I'm only going to drink on the weekends, and then you find yourself drinking on a Wednesday. If you in any way feel like alcohol has more control over you than you have over it, I think my message would be like, don't wait for a rock bottom. That's what that term alcoholic and normal drinkers, I think, does to us. It makes us think, well, the question is like, is it bad enough? And I think that when I heard this for the first time, it totally changed my thinking about everything. It was like, no, it's not bad enough for me to, I mean, it was never bad enough for me to have to stop drinking. But the question of like, is this good enough for me? Is this good enough for me? And if you're in that space where you're like, I'm not sure it's bad enough that I need to stop drinking, but I know I'm not happy where I am, I would guess that you're in that spectrum of gray area drinking. I mean, what would you say?
I think you said it beautifully, honestly. It is so much about you can make a positive change for yourself regarding your drinking without experiencing some run-in with the law or some injury or the dissolving of an important relationship. Like it doesn't have to come to that rock bottom because honestly, you don't know when that rock bottom might be. The people that experience a rock bottom aren't like waking up that day and being like, you know what? I'm going to drink until I get into a car crash. That's not the plan for anybody.
Mhm.
And I'm just reflecting back on my own experience. I'm so grateful. There's so many times where I could have experienced a rock bottom moment,
Mm,
but thank God I figured out how to ditch the desire to drink without needing that experience. And you deserve to have a life that is better than the worst thing that could happen to you. It
mm,
doesn't have to be, and I think you said that so perfectly. Like, is this good enough? If
mhm,
you're feeling like you are out of control, if you feel like you're not yourself, if you don't feel good when you wake up in the morning, that's enough of a reason to make a change.
mhm,
And change is possible, I guess is the last thing that I want to say is that it really isn't um change might take some time and it's going to
mhm,
take some interior work.
mhm.
But it is possible and it is absolutely worth it, I think I could say for both of us.
Yeah, and I just I love now that there's this sober curious community. There's so many spaces that people are getting more interested in this, and I think this is a big reason why you and I wanted to do this podcast. It's like I had to be 52 and drinking for 2.5 decades more than I wanted to realize that I wasn't alone. And I don't want anybody to have to wait that long. Like if you hear this, what I would hope is that maybe you're like, oh my gosh, like I can relate to Jonathan or I can relate to Ellen, and there's more people like me, and we can there's so many more alternatives than calling yourself an alcoholic and just going cold turkey and, feeling like you're going to have to be miserable for the rest of your life because you don't drink. I mean, that was another fear, like, oh, if I give up drinking, I'm going to be miserable because it's my favorite thing to do in the world. And, the work that we do and the methodology that we learned with Annie Grace and This Naked Mind, it really, you come to realize how much more you can enjoy life. I mean, I have never been happier, more fulfilled, more energized, more grateful, more all of the things now, almost 2 years alcohol free, than I ever was drinking. And I didn't believe that was possible. So I just also want to leave you with that hope, like that if you're afraid of like making the change because it's going to make like life boring and dark and lonely, like you're in for a really great surprise and treat because that's not has not been my experience at all.
Thanks for listening to the Alcohol Myth Podcast.
If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love to hear about it.
Send your questions, stories, or ideas for future episodes to thealcoholmyth@gmail.com.
We read every message. We really do.
Take good care of yourself. I'll see you next time.